Hey everybody, Brett Rice, coreVISION Financial Group, coming to you today with a new video in our series on financial topics. Today I'll be joined by Beau Browning, and we'll be talking about what your options are with old 401ks. You leave a job, you have a 401k or a retirement plan there. What are your options with those? So again, go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our videos so you're notified when we post a new one. We have, we're getting up there, about 70 videos I think we have on the YouTube page now. So please spend some time on there. Look, see if you got some topics. You have questions about anything, please feel free to reach out. Welcome, Beau. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's always exciting when you're here.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, give yourself a brief introduction.
Yep. So, Beau Browning. I'm a partner here at coreVISION Financial Group. This is unbelievably my 21st year in the industry. So
that happened quick.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm halfway through my working career. It just seems insane.
Yeah.
So, I've been doing this for 21 years, started out at John Hancock, moved to LPL, and then we created coreVISION in 2015. But yeah, I'm excited to be here, talk about rollovers. I think this topic is extremely relevant, especially because typically a person has 7 jobs in their working career. So it's something that they experience more than once.
Right. And a lot of times, especially the younger people, they're like, I don't know what to do with these things. And you have, like, it seems like so many different people have different strategies, right? Oh, I just automatically roll it to my new employer every time. I just had a discussion with Lacey. She said, that's what I do every time is I just automatically roll it to the next one. And I'm like, well, have you ever looked into your other options? She said, no. I mean, this lady's almost 50 years old, and I think she said 6 times she's rolled a 401k.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, but she said she'd never looked at it. She wasn't even sure what all of her other options were.
The positive is she's making sure she doesn't leave something behind.
Right.
Benefit of her looking at least at other options is she might be able to either save some money or she might get better investment options. Yep. Because moving from plan to plan, they all have different ones, but they are limited. So we'll talk about that.
Right. So let's talk about that. What happens when you leave a job?
So the first thing that has to happen, at least when we're just considering a 401k, is that the employer must change your status in the system to terminate it. Sounds like a terrible word, but that is how they have to identify that you're eligible to move that money elsewhere. That money remains in your name in most plans. Of course, it remains in your name. In most plans, it can remain in the plan. Sometimes you will get a mailer that will tell you that funds have to be transferred to an IRA in your name with the same carrier or to an outside IRA. Sometimes they do that with small accounts.
We were talking about this before we started the video, though. They have force out rules now.
Yes.
Like if your account is small enough.
Yep.
I mean, they'll just mail you a check.
Yep.
To the address they have on file and tell you they got to move it out. So, you got to be aware of some of that stuff.
Yeah, because that can be a huge tax implication.
Yeah. I mean, then you could also have a check floating around out there that you don't even know is coming.
Exactly.
And you don't even know to be looking for it, right?
Right. And they usually come in unmarked envelopes.
Envelopes.
Because they don't want them,
right?
Identifiable.
Right.
So
I mean, you need to know some of that stuff. I also think something that can be confusing for people is the vesting.
Oh, yeah.
Like people will be like, hey, this is how much money I have in there. And then when you get into the details, they're like, well, wait a second. There was supposed to be more money in there. It's like, well, you didn't meet the vesting schedule so that money stays with the plan. And so it's like just making sure you understand, when you call and talk to somebody about it, asking questions. Hey, is there any of this money that I'm not going to get? Is there a vesting schedule? All of those things that you run across and people are like, and that's, part of the reason people don't call and follow up on these.
Yep. And the key to what Brett mentioned is investing only pertains to the employer dollars. Employee dollars are always yours, but that employer match section could have a vesting schedule, and typical ones that we see are 4, 5, or 6 years. And so it is wise to ask that question, because you could look at your statement and go, oh, I have $50,000. And then all of a sudden you get a check for $38,000 and you're wondering where that other $12,000 went.
Right.
You might have only been there a few years. And thus some of the employer dollars might not be all eligible to be rolled.
All right. So real quick, we're going to talk about, this talks about potential issues.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, 401ks, well, they're great tools to get people saving money. They do have limited investment options, right? They normally, I'll say in the mid 20s is the number. They'll have target date funds in there. You can build your own portfolio. You know, it's one of the things that when we talk to people about 401k, it's like, no, get involved, get in there.
Absolutely.
But then on the other side, we're like, well, they have limited investment options.
Correct. And there's a reason for that, obviously.
Sure.
You don't want to provide the entire investment world to people. You want to make it so that they're good, strong options, and that people can, pick something that has a decent track record. The pitfalls can be, let's even take like an S&P index fund. It may not be the cheapest S&P index fund. It might be one that has historically slightly underperformed due to expenses, something like that. Target date funds, which build you a preset allocation. Well, historically, they've been pretty high in international exposure until last year. The 15, 16 years prior to that, international had underperformed. Well, if you've got a 35, 40% allocation to international, you were probably underperforming for the better part of a decade or more. And so you have to look under the hood and make sure that you understand what those options are and where you can best perform. What's nice about an IRA is you have much less restriction on those investment options. Typically, broker-dealers are aligned with about every investment company out there. And if it's not all, it's probably 90+%. So,
and I think one of the biggest benefits in the investment section of a 401k is the target date fund.
Yeah.
You know, you get somebody in their 20s, they say they long-term stay at a job. They're not going in there every couple of years and saying, hey, I need to rebalance this asset allocation.
Yes.
So I think the target date gives everybody a pretty good option that allows automatic, I'll say moves to being more conservative.
Yeah.
As you move through your career.
Yes. It'll start aggressive and it'll move more conservative. So that 20-year-old that's 40 years away from retirement is going to get an aggressive allocation mix. You always want to look under the hood just to make sure that it's not over allocated or under allocated into a certain area. But I agree. Those are great options, especially for a person just starting, because you get diversification without having to build it out of the other 20 funds. Now, somebody that might have $500,000 or $1 million in their 401k might look at the other options because you can probably tailor that and save a little cost.
Yep. And, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but the managed accounts inside of 401ks, I think is something, at least the one I'm familiar with, is it's performed very, very well.
Yeah.
And there's somebody going in there doing that asset allocation for you.
That's right.
And it seems to have really paid off.
Yeah.
Now, it cost. There's an added cost to being in that. But at the same time, I think, at least for the last 12 months, it paid for itself.
Yes.
Easy.
Yes.
Easy.
Yes.
All right. So when you leave a company, you basically got 4 options on what you can do with the money you have in your 401k.
That's right.
Let's talk about them.
Okay. So first would be you can leave it with the current employer if they'll allow it. Of course, you and I had just talked about there are some force outs.
Yep.
Companies, those can be very specific. So, but by and large, a lot of decent size employers allow you the option to just leave the money in there.
Yep.
Some smaller ones don't love it because they get charged per head.
Right.
Somewhere between $10 and $50 per head, and so they may want to just eliminate that expense.
I want to say I feel like the smaller ones are the ones that call and say, "Hey, call and get these people out of the plan."
Absolutely,
right? Because like you said, they're paying per participant, so they're automatic. Like, hey, this person's been gone 6 months. Get them out of the plan.
Yep. Whereas a large employer, consider Cummins or Lilly here locally, they're just not going to waste their time thinking about who's still left in the plan and who's not.
Right.
The expense is negligible for them. So yeah, you can keep it in the current plan if you're happy with the investment options. If you're, maybe the financial advisor that comes around and visits with you is somebody that you've had great experience with, you certainly can continue to participate there. You just can't add to the account anymore.
Right. So again, we talk about, the old plan will have limited investment options.
Yep.
Your new plan will probably also have limited investment options.
Yep.
So when you're looking at, hey, which one of these do I do? Those kind of balance each other out right off the bat.
Yeah. So that second option is you can roll it to the new employer. If you
Correct.
have gotten hired somewhere else and they have a plan, that is an option. Most of them allow for roll-ins. There are a couple that don't. So again, that's another plan specific. And if you can't, then let's go to our third option.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just Brent and I dealt with one last week, and we were like, "What do you?" We were
couldn't
trying to
roll it
help
in?
them to roll it in, and
Yeah.
they just said, "No, we don't accept those." And it's like, why would you not accept more assets?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I have found that to be a little bit strange as well.
Yeah,
but it must
I was
just
very
be the way
surprised.
that it was in the plan document.
Yeah.
So your third option would be rolling that to an IRA. An IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. A lot of times the employer-sponsored plan, let's say it were Principal or Fidelity, they all have that option. You could actually do it at the employer-sponsored plan. Or you can roll it to an external IRA with your own financial advisor, broker-dealer. We do a lot of that here for obvious reasons. And the benefits there are your investment options are open to you. Cost comparatively, you always have to weigh those options. Depends on if you're in a brokerage account, advisory account, those types of things. But there is more flexibility. There can also be death benefits to an IRA versus a 401k. Sure. Again, that's getting a little bit in the weeds, but there are some provisions there where you are better off in an IRA versus a 401k. And on the other hand, there are some benefits of a 401k, like withdrawals at age 55, that don't that you wouldn't have in an IRA penalty free. Okay, so there are benefits, pros and cons to both. I want to be clear about that. So,
yeah. I personally think one of the biggest is the investment selection, right? That's when you're rolling to an IRA with someone like that. The amount of investments that you have access to is almost endless.
Correct.
As opposed to a particular family or, a certain group of funds that your 401k or retirement sponsored plan would have. That does give you access to more and different things you could do.
Correct. And a lot of times, like let's say in your plan, there will be an offering of a large cap growth, a large cap blend, and a large cap value fund. You might have one of those. Mm-hmm. Well, the universe of those, by the way, are like 1,100 in large cap growth,
in
1,100
each one.
in large cap blend. So you can see what rolling that out can do for your at least flexibility of your investment options. That's just something to keep in mind. One thing I did want to mention before we move to the last option, you can roll an IRA to a Roth IRA. Now, sometimes we might do that when the account balance is small enough because there is a tax implication to those dollars that are rolled over. If you move a traditional 401k to a Roth IRA, you will have a tax implication of the money that you roll. So somebody that has 100,000 is probably not interested in doing that, at least not for the whole thing. Somebody that might have only worked there a year or two and had only built up less than $10,000 might go, hey, paying the tax on it now and getting it in a Roth where it's going to come out tax-free to me later after it grows to, from 10 grand to 50 might be a huge benefit. So you can do that as well.
Let's talk about real quick the loss of employer plan protections on the asset, because I think that's something, in the 401k, there are, protections in there, from lawsuits and certain things that an IRA doesn't give it.
Right. So, the employer, which I guess we can talk about ERISA, which regulates those employer plans. You are going to have some protection against litigation because you have a company essentially backing that, right? Who is your buffer in between you, the plan, and the employer's the sponsor of that plan, versus an IRA, which is essentially, again, an individual's decision. You're making a choice to go with a broker dealer. The choice isn't being fed to you.
Right.
You're choosing that, versus in a 401k, you don't get to pick that the plan is with Fidelity, right? You don't get to pick that choice. So in an IRA, you're going to have a little bit less protection when considering, is there a lawsuit against fund company A, or is there an issue with the plan where they didn't put my contributions in my account and they accidentally put it in, Joe's account? That can be a problem, and thus you have protection against that, so that you're not going to have to pay to fight that, right?
Yep.
They're going to fix that. And normally it would be fixed at a broker dealer with an IRA, but there is no guarantee associated with that.
Okay. And then option number 4, cash it out.
Yep. Option number 4 is our least favorite, but we also understand that people have, a situation. Let's say that you are employed for quite some time. Maybe you haven't saved up an emergency fund, lose your job, and get in a situation where you've got bills coming in, and you haven't quite gotten a new job yet. Well, you might need that money to offset those expenses during that time. The reason we mentioned that it's our least favorite option, you have a 10% IRS penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half, and you owe taxes on those dollars. So those combined, you could pay upwards of 30 and 40%,
sure,
on those dollars coming out. So 60 cents on the dollar is a tough pill to swallow. We understand circumstantially that does happen sometimes, and you can't avoid it. But
there are options. Pitfalls. In a scenario like that, you maybe don't have to take the entire balance.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Partial
talk to
withdrawals.
A financial advisor and just get options.
That's right. One thing we'd be remiss to not talk about on rollovers, 401ks, whatever, you do sometimes have an option of a hardship withdrawal. So you could, while you're currently working, some plans allow for you to take out money at a qualified hardship. Now, I'm not even going to explain what a qualified hardship is, because it's literally scrutinized at an individual level.
Yep.
So the plan administrator kind of has to hand approve it. And then also you can take a loan against a 401k. That's another really nice feature of a 401k versus an IRA. You can take a loan while you're employed of typically up to 50% of that balance. So let's say you needed new windows at the house, and that's a big expense of 15 or 20 grand. You might be able to get that money from there, and then you can pay it back over a 5-year period. Most of them come with a 5-year payback.
Yep.
And that can just come out of your paycheck. And when you, all the while you're doing that loan, your money that was invested, that original 100 grand, is all still invested and growing, as long as you pay that back within that period.
Yep.
And so that's the cool part. You don't have to sacrifice that 15 to 20 grand that you might have had to take a loan against, not growing in the market during all that time. So that's cool.
Let's talk about tax considerations in these rollovers.
Yes.
Let's talk about the difference between direct and indirect rollovers and the tax implications on those.
Yes. So a direct rollover, you're going to have no tax implication. Most companies are going to read you a tax notice, and it basically says there is no tax consequence as long as that check is deposited on the direct rollover. So if you had 100 grand, the check comes out as 100 grand, it gets rolled into an IRA as 100 grand or a new employer sponsored plan. If you're going to do an indirect rollover, this happens very infrequently, but it does and can happen. Traditionally, what will happen is the 401k, when they roll it over, will automatically withhold 20% federal taxes, no state. If you are going to deposit that into an IRA, you have to make up the difference. So if 100,000 became 80 due to the tax withholding, you have to personally make up, if you want to roll over all of it, personally make up that 20 grand to get that 100 in there. And then, yes, you will get that back on your taxes, but it's a whole year later.
Right.
So that's the tough part about an indirect rollover. There used to be more of that where some plans forced it that way.
Right.
But now it's very, very infrequent that we even experience that. In fact, I wouldn't say the last one I had was like 6 years ago. So it's not a common practice. They understand it's a big burden. Now, somebody might want to use that money in a temporary time period. By the way, you have, is it 60 days to roll that back in to an IRA or an employer-sponsored plan. So somebody might go, hey, I need that money temporarily to put a deposit on a second home in Florida, but I will get it back by selling my house. And then they make it whole, but it has to happen within that 60 days. So there are some special circumstances where somebody might want one of those.
Yeah. Very infrequent, but there is occasionally the need for it.
Yep.
So when we're going through the decision making of, hey, which one of these options fit me best? Is let's just talk about that. Like, how does someone walk through and decide which one of these options is best for me?
So I think one of the main things that you look at is, first thing I would probably ask myself is, do I have a financial advisor already that works outside of the employer-sponsored plan? That person is going to be able to direct you to some of the best decisions that you can make. You're going to be looking at investment options. You're going to be looking at a comparison in the fees. You're going to be looking at consolidation of retirement accounts. So, I don't want 15 401ks during my career just hanging out in different accounts because it's hard to keep track of. I want to consolidate those into one. So like the lady you mentioned earlier, hey, just has a pattern and a process of moving it into the new employer-sponsored plan. That may not be the best thing, but at least at a bare minimum, you're avoiding leaving money.
It's not the worst option.
It's also not the worst option. So, and then you and I had talked about this. Does your new employer plan allow a roll-in? Or is an IRA your only option? Some of those plan document specifics might tell you that your 4 options are limited to 2. And then, we talked about Roth conversion strategy. Is that an option for somebody? So, again, we want to make sure we're avoiding, cashing out the whole thing if we only need partial. We want to make sure that it's not coming as an indirect rollover if it can be done as a direct. Those types of things. So we want to make sure that we understand all those implications. Again, I'll direct you to, if you do work with a financial advisor, that person can help you through those 5 or 6 questions to help you make the best decision.
Yeah, I agree. Closing takeaways?
It's an important decision. It is definitely something that as people change jobs, most people do have different jobs in their career. It just is part of it. It's something that you should always ask yourself post leaving a job. Have I handled that so that we don't leave a bunch of accounts out there? Again, I think that's one of the main things. So that would be my takeaway. Make sure that you ask questions either to the employer-sponsored plan or a financial advisor to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to be doing and you don't have an unintended consequence like taxes or an indirect rollover that you're kind of unaware of or blindsided by.
Good points.
How about you? Closing takeaways for you?
Well, I think this is one of the most important things people can do when they change jobs. Is, I spent almost 20 years working in manufacturing, and I can't tell you how many times people would change jobs, and next thing you know, they'd be calling back, be like, hey, who's our 401? I never rolled that over. And you're like, you've been gone for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, it is super important, because long term, a lot of these end up like Indiana unclaimed. Like and trying to find them after the fact is very difficult.
It's super difficult. And the government knows that, by the way. I just saw today on CNBC that there is kind of a pilot program that federal government is trying to, at least they're going to start out with small 401ks, and they've stipulated $1,000 to $7,000, that if a person is hired by a new employer and they see that through the database, that they might be able to push those funds. Now, the key is they have to be pre-tax to pre-tax,
Right.
Roth. So you have to have those options on both, or else it could still be left behind. But hopefully there are some steps. I would love it if there was a database to know if people still had plans out there, but that doesn't exist. Like Indiana Unclaimed has these, old paycheck. Oh, I didn't pick my paycheck up at, the shoe store when I used to work there as a 17-year-old. And you can still get those dollars. But for 401ks, it's a little bit tougher.
Well, Beau, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Great topic.
Had a
It's
great
something
time.
we've talked about wanting to do this for a minute, right?
Yeah.
Because it applies to a lot of people.
That's right.
Again, Brett Rice, Beau Browning, coreVISION Financial Group. Thanks for joining us today. Our contact information is at the end of the video. Please feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. Thanks again.